NFL Live from our Cowboys reporter Todd Archer. The Cowboys have released cornerback Trevon Diggs. He goes through the waiver process, and if unclaimed, he will be a free agent. So if Diggs is claimed off waivers, Dan, that team is on the hook for, $472,000 in Week 18. It wasn't too long ago. Diggs was tying a franchise record for picks. What's your reaction to him suddenly released?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. There's a high salary attached to him. He hasn't been healthy. He's missed almost 30 games in the last 3 years. I will say this, and even though he's played sparingly this year, it wasn't good. He wasn't nearly the player he was. He was a very high-end player not long ago, and I would not be surprised. At least Chicago and Green Bay calling. How are you? What's your health like? Do you still think you could play at a decent level? Because if you're talking about Chicago, who's got a Al Harris on their defensive staff, who's got the history with Trevon Diggs and had him playing his very best football, it's worth a phone call to see, do you want to add him to your football team and certainly for your playoff run? So I'm not shocked that Dallas moved on from him because of the salary. But I wouldn't be surprised if one of those two teams made a phone call just to kind of check in to see, is it worth the next step in a process of bringing him in?
Yeah, it's just you go back to 2023 and Diggs signs that 5-year deal, $97 million, and then after week 2 tears his ACL at practice. Just not.
CBS Sports HQ, the Dallas Cowboys are waiving veteran cornerback Trevon Diggs. That's the latest from our NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. Diggs signed a 5-year extension with the Cowboys worth up to $97 million back in 2023, but has struggled on the field since. He appeared in 8 games this season with 0 interceptions and 25 tackles, has dealt with injuries. There was the knee and then the concussion, and it all culminates into Trevon Diggs no longer being a Dallas Cowboy. Let's go on site and welcome in our Garrett Podell to break this all down. Garrett, it kind of feels like the writing was on the wall with this. We heard from Trevon post-Chargers game. The reporters asked him, do you feel like this is your last home game? He kind of said, it's going to be tough if it is, but that's the reality. How did we get here with Trevon Diggs, one of the most beloved players for the Dallas Cowboys?
Hey, Haley, that's a great question. And coming here from Dallas, I can kind of lay it out for you. So in the spring, Trevon Diggs had a second knee procedure. We know he tore his ACL in 2023 in practice, but in January, he had a chondral graft procedure to kind of clean out some issues with his knee. And the Cowboys wanted him to do most of his rehab at the Star in Frisco, the team facility, during OTAs, during mandatory minicamp. And Diggs opted to train away from the team in South Florida during OTAs. And per a provision in his contract, the team was able to dock his 2025 salary by $500,000. And Stephen Jones, I had a chance to speak with him among other reporters in the area at that time. And he said, yeah, we really would have preferred Trevon to be here. When we're paying someone like that, we want one of our leaders in the building. So that kind of set the whole tone for this season. Fast forward to the beginning of the year, he makes it back for week 1 against the Eagles after rehabbing, but didn't look quite right, and just there was a tremendous amount of disconnect between himself and new defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. When he was in his salad days of racking up double-digit interceptions under Dan Quinn, the Cowboys ran man coverage in almost a third of their plays, which was a top 5 rate when Quinn was the DC from 2021 to 2023. Eberflus comes in, and for most of the year, they were a top 10 zone defense percentage team. And Trevon Diggs was pretty vocal about not appreciating that. And when the Cowboys decided to run a little more man against Justin Fields and the Jets back in week 5, they did pretty well. The Cowboys held the Jets 22 points in a 37-22 win. And Diggs said, well, that was like instant grits. We were able to play a more cohesive defense playing man. And I asked Matt Eberflus after those comments and said, what do you think about Trevon feeling validated when you do play more man? And Eberflus looked at me and said, we're going to make coverage decisions based on the matchups that week. And then he looked at me and said, I don't like instant grits. So there was kind of this whole tension all year long between Diggs and Eberflus. And it's kind of really boiled over. You mentioned real quick the last home game against the Chargers. He mentioned when there was a touchdown to Ladd McConkey that came, which Diggs was the flat defender, and then McConkey was all alone in the right corner of the end zone. Diggs was asked, well, was that your responsibility? And he just said, cover 2, cover 2, cover 2. So from beginning to end, Diggs was not really a fit in Eberflus' zone-based scheme.
Yeah, I gave up a touchdown to Lag McConkey on that specific play. It's interesting, Garrett. I'm looking at the roster for the Dallas Cowboys in the secondary. I mean, that whole defense all year long, that's all we talked about was how poor it was. But really, the secondary, and you see all of the IRs, the outs, the questionables. This team, I feel like over the last few years has tried to invest in the secondary, but you've got guys like Wanye Thomas, who just got an extension. He's out. Savone Rebel, they drafted him last year. He came in with a banged up knee. Kalen Carson's been dealing with the shoulder injury. I mean, the list goes on and on when it comes to the secondary. So now that we know that they're moving on from Diggs, and if he does not get claimed, he will become a free agent, where does that leave the rest of the secondary in Dallas?
I mean, it's an interesting thing to talk about because there's a lot of moving parts. Deron Bland, he had the foot stress fracture at the end of training camp in 2024. He re-aggravated his foot and is currently on injured reserve. And upon the heels of trading Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers, they extended Deron Bland on a 4-year, $90+ million deal to be their new cornerback one. His health, I mean, at this point, 2 foot injuries in consecutive years, that makes you question his availability as the guy going forward. You'd think he'd recover, but the foot seems like it's always going to be an issue. And with Revel at times, he looked good, but very much looked like a rookie. And so that's really going to be hard to judge him because he's just coming back from that torn ACL. And everyone else kind of really injury plagued. And I think also the cohesion with the safety unit. Donovan Wilson, he's more of a box defender, great against the run, was out of place a few times in coverage up the year. Malik Hooker in the Vikings game really struggled of late, and those are 2 veterans back there. So I really think this is a secondary room that you could see a massive overhaul around Bland and Revel and a lot of different pieces in 2026.
I bet they wish they still had guys like Nashawn Wright, even Jordan Lewis, both of those guys having great seasons elsewhere, but they've got to work with what they've got. And so this is kind of the next big task for the Dallas Cowboys going into the offseason. What moves are they going to make? Garrett, before I let you go, I want to get back to the Trevon Diggs side of this because you and I have both seen him perform when he is at his best. He set the record for interceptions his rookie year. So the potential is there for him to be a top-level defender. What team or teams maybe could you see him landing at to maybe reinvigorate that career that we saw from him?
Well, Haley, there's an obvious number one here, right? It's the Green Bay Packers. That's where his best friend, Micah Parsons, is. And when I was covering the Micah Parsons trade saga right before Parsons was sent out the door, after the last preseason game when Micah Parsons was sitting on the training table disgusted with kind of how the contract negotiations were going, Diggs stepped in for Parsons as his spokesperson with the media. I spoke with him among 5 other reporters in the hallway outside the locker room at AT&T Stadium. And when Diggs was done talking on Parsons' behalf, Parsons poked his head around the corner and said, "All right, Trevon, you said all good things." So reuniting those guys, not just because of the friendship between them, but the Packers' needs makes a ton of sense because you've seen with Keyshawn Nixon, he's struggled as to be the Packers' number 1 corner in the last couple of weeks, and Carrington Valentine, the number 2 outside corner. He's young and really struggled at times as well. He got stiff-armed into the shadow realm by Derrick Henry last week against the Baltimore Ravens. So the Packers are a team where, with Parsons coming back healthy off the torn ACL next year, a team that can create quarterback pressure, that'd be an ideal place, I think, for Diggs to go. Other than that, I mean, I think you'd want to send him to kind of veteran defenses where he wouldn't be asked to maybe do a ton. I mean, I think the Chargers defense would make a lot of sense. That's kind of a defensive back room by committee with Derwin James kind of leading the charge. I think Chargers, Packers, and even maybe a team like the Ravens, who their defense has kind of struggled this year, but in the past has been really strong. They've got some secondary needs as well.
All right, we will keep our eyes on it. I'm looking at the picture of Trevon and Micah exchanging jerseys after that Sunday Night Football tie between the Cowboys and the Packers. Maybe that was a little foreshadowing. Garrett Podell bringing us the latest from the Dallas Cowboys. Trevon Diggs officially waived team. And you can see the statistics here. He's got the abilities to be that top corner that we've seen over the years. 6 seasons with the Cowboys, a 2-time Pro Bowler, a first-team All-Pro back in 2021. And as I mentioned earlier, he led the NFL with 11 interceptions back in 2021.